Welcome to episode 196 of the Various and Sundry Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who has a bone to pick with the NFL officiating, John Scott Sloat.
I'm not the only one.
Yes, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in the sports segment. How's that?
What role did Taylor Swift play in those calls?
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh.
I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but just a little.
I mean, I'm already so nauseated by the over-the-top attention to T. Sweezy in NFL football games, and the Chiefs games, really.
Yeah. Well, it was so interesting. They never even mentioned, Ryan Reynolds is in that same box. His wife, Blake Lively. I mean, both superstars. Mm-hmm. It was all T. Swift.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman. Wolverine was up there in the box. They didn't make mention of Wolverine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did you see the tweet? Did you see the tweet? It put side by side Travis Kelce looking up at the box, trying to get Taylor Swift.
Trying to see Taylor. Yep.
Yeah. And Zach Wilson looking up into the same box, looking for
Travis's mom.
Yep.
Which, if you pay attention, that's a pretty deep cut.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
I sent that one to Nate in Ohio yesterday because I thought he would appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Anyway, let's do the usual here. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. And we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a nice word or two about us on whatever platform you access the show. So, all right, John, let's jump right into the sports here.
Sure.
So, since you're clearly a little warm under the collar about this, let's just dive right into the NFL here. Your beloved Jets, Jets, Jets.
Yep.
Played the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football last night.
Arguably the best team in football right now.
Yeah, arguably.
Yeah, them and the 49ers. Maybe the Cowboys are in that mix now.
I still think the Bills are in that mix as well. I think I'm higher on the Bills than you are, but
yeah, I think the Bills are on the downhill slope.
We'll see. Anyway,
they did beat the Dolphins this week.
Yeah, convincingly. Mm-hmm. But so the Jets played the Chiefs. Obviously, when the schedule makers put this together, they were thinking this would be Aaron Rodgers against Patrick Mahomes. Instead, it's Zach Wilson against Patrick Mahomes. And early on, admittedly, you had to be nervous that it was going to get out of hand.
I was sick to my stomach.
They were down 7. Your beloved Jets were down 17-0.
17-0. Yeah, that's right.
And then they get a safety. The Jets get a safety.
Yep.
I feel like that turned the game around.
It really did.
And
sort of. They sort of got a safety. I mean, they got a safety, but it's not like they sacked anybody in the end zone or anything like that.
I did not know that a face mask penalty on an offensive lineman in the end zone was a safety. I know holding is.
Yeah. It makes sense, though.
Yeah, it does. Though, to be honest, I do think the face mask began outside of the end zone before. Anyway, regardless, it was called on the field.
Yep. And
again, when you slow it down to slow motion, you can see that.
Yep.
In real time. I think I think sometimes we are overcritical of officiating in things that happen in live action that officials have to make instantaneous judgment in real speed. And then you slow it down and you're like, oh, how could they miss that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're watching it literally frame by frame on a zoomed in view. That official is watching 13 things at once, and it's live speed.
Yep.
Anyway.
There's always room to criticize the officials. I think these officials were particularly bad.
All right.
For reasons we'll get to.
Well, so the Jets came roaring back, tied it at 20.
Yeah. Did you see the first drive of the second half there?
Yes.
That was incredible. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
Caveat, with Jets uniforms.
Right.
I think he was 5 for 5 and went all the way down to the field. I mean, had some great catches to everybody except Garrett Wilson didn't catch a ball on that drive.
Yeah, though he got plenty of – I forget how many he had for the game. But
it's like 12 or 14, something like that.
Yeah, and there was one that was only like a 7-yard catch where he was leaning out of like his – he was barely
impressive.
inbounds, and he literally caught it on his fingertips, and the ball did not move.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at that, you're like, oh, that can't be complete. That had to bobble. Nope. He is amazing.
Yeah. And then your boy Jeremy Ruckert got some playing time last night.
Yes, finally. Yes.
So he had a great catch on that drive over the shoulder.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this. Zach Wilson put it in a spot only he could catch it.
How about Zach?
But Ruckert's been getting a lot of praise for his blocking. He's a tremendous blocker.
Well, it's taken him. I mean, this is year 2. So I think, he's finally figuring it out. I think I expected him probably to contribute a little earlier than he has, but he's putting it together, and I think he's going to be a very good NFL tight end. He's not going to be Travis Kelce. He's not going to be on that level. Not going to be that. But I think he has the potential to be a guy who could play in the league for 10 years.
Yeah.
And be a consistent pass catcher, a good blocker. He's he has wide receiver ball skills when it comes to catching the ball. He made some catches at Ohio State that were just, spectacular. So I hope he does well.
But I will say, like, positive, Zach Wilson played immeasurably better than I think anybody expected.
Yeah, after the first, couple drives, he was not great, but after that, he was starting to get the ball out of his hands and get it on target. And, I mean, he missed 2 potential touchdowns early.
Garrett Wilson,
one to Garrett Wilson, where he just overthrew. I mean, it would have been a spectacular one-handed catch if he'd have got it.
Yep.
And then there was one where he was scrambling. I forget who the player was. Maybe it was a tight end, not Ruckert, who was like had to kind of dive for it. It was a little off target.
Oh, Conklin. Yeah. In the end zone, you mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
If those are better throws, those are touchdowns.
Those are better throws. Yep. I 100% agree. But it was just head and shoulders better than anything we've seen out of him.
Sure.
No interceptions. He had the one very costly fumble.
Yeah.
And the defense after the first quarter against I think that's the best offense in the NFL. The Chiefs.
I don't know. I mean, they're one of the best. I mean, they are surprisingly untalented at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
Yep.
And they have a good running game with Pacheco and Edwards-Helaire.
Yep.
And their offensive line is obviously good. But they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. They don't have like an elite receiver anymore. But still, point taken, they're a very, very good offense.
And after the first quarter, we held them to 6 points in the rest of the game.
Yeah.
That's a next level sort of job.
That's good.
Picked off Patrick Mahomes twice. Should have been 3.
Yeah.
So now, like, there's a million little things that happen in a game that cause you to not win.
Mm-hmm.
We doinked a field goal from 53.
Yes.
Zach fumbled the ball.
Mm-hmm.
We missed a couple of passes. We already talked about that. All of those things are true.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to throw everything on the officials for some of these horrendous calls, but we're down 3, 4 minutes to go, and it's 3rd and 25, and Jermaine Johnson, defensive end, is running, and Patrick Mahomes runs behind him, and he tries to turn to go, and he can't turn. He's being held. He's thrown his arms up. He's trying to run away. There's a good 3 or 4 seconds. There's no holding call, and Patrick Mahomes scrambles for the first down.
Yeah, I do remember that play now. Yeah,
that was
crucial.
That was awful. And then we I think sack Mahomes, and they have another 3rd and 17 or something, and they throw it. We intercept it, and they call defensive holding on Sauce Gardner, which everybody I'm reading is going, yeah, that was garbage. That's just a bad call.
Okay.
And it cost us the game ultimately in those last minutes.
All right. You know you're going to hear from Nate in Ohio about this.
Does he think that was a good call?
I don't know, but I'd be surprised if we don't hear from Nate from Ohio about complaining about the officiating.
And I've already said there's a million little plays along the way that cause you to lose a game.
That's true.
However, those two plays were pretty massive.
Yeah, for sure.
Those two plays were very, very big.
Yes, agreed.
And big misses. And I think the NFL is doing an apology thing midweek. So like when injury reports come out, the NFL is saying, hey, we missed these calls over the last week.
Yeah.
I anticipate those two being on the –
Could be. There were 2 weeks in a row where Ohio State got a note from the Big Ten about penalties that were called against Ohio State that literally cost them a touchdown. Like on the play, a touchdown was scored, and it was called back because of a penalty. 2 weeks in a row, the Big Ten had one that they sent to Ohio State. Yeah, that holding call on that touchdown run that was nullified, bad call. Should have been called. That should have been a touchdown. Yeah, you know that play where Marvin Harrison caught the touchdown pass where he stepped out of bounds before that? Well, he was forced out of bounds, so he shouldn't have been flagged for it.
Yeah.
That should have been a touchdown. So, yeah, it happens at the college level as well.
Yeah. So I fully intend at least one of those to get an apology from the league on. Now, that doesn't change anything.
Nope, it's worth nothing.
We could, that interception, we get it at our own 40, 45, somewhere along there. Who knows what happens? We could kick a field goal. I mean, we have this guy that can hit 60-yard field goals. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he does that and ties it up.
Yeah.
And then it goes to overtime, or maybe we get some, Mormon magic and we drive all the way down the field and score a touchdown.
Maybe.
But who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? I will say he took the full loss on his shoulders. Like, this is my fault. And the presser and the coaches basically came out and said the opposite. No, this isn't Zach's fault.
Yeah.
We actually think the officiating's to blame.
But that's what the quarterback has to do.
Absolutely. I agree.
That's part of the job. Even if you don't play poorly, even when you play well, if your team loses, the expectation is the quarterback says, I did not make enough plays.
100%. 100%. Got to be that way.
Even if it's not true.
Yep.
Even if it's not true. That's the expectation of the quarterback. You come out and say it's on me.
100%. I 100% agree. And it was good to see.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I feel pretty good going into Denver next week now.
Okay. Which brings me to the other game I want to talk about quickly. The Bears.
Yeah.
Did you see any of that game?
No. It was a close game, wasn't it?
The Bears were up, what was it? They were up 21-7 at one point. Into the third quarter, up 21-7. And here's the frustrating thing. Like, again, I'm not a Bears fan. I want Justin Fields to do well.
Yeah.
And he played amazing. Like, in the first half, he was 15 of 15 for like close to 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. The only incompletion he had, which I don't really think of it, was they threw a Hail Mary at the end of the half that fell incomplete.
Okay. Yeah.
So really, that doesn't count. That's not really – I mean, technically it's an incompletion, but –
he had over 300 yards passing, had 4 touchdown passes, 1 interception. I take that ratio all day.
Yes. Now, he was sacked and he fumbled the ball, which led to a scoop and score for Denver, which turned the game. So you can probably blame him for that. And then the interception was just, they're down 28-21, I guess it was, and they're trying to – or they're down – no, they were down 31. 31-28? I forget. They're down. They're trying to score late in the game, and he throws a pick. Okay. So, anyway, I just felt bad for him. Bears are terrible. The Broncos are terrible.
Yeah, the Broncos.
Both those teams are terrible. Let's talk quickly college football. Ohio State did not play this weekend. They had a bye week after their win over Notre Dame. Notre Dame came back from the dead and beat Duke.
At Duke?
On the road.
Yeah.
Georgia struggled. USC beat Colorado 48-41.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Even though at one point they were up 34-7. Colorado came back and made it modestly interesting. So, yeah, it's just next weekend Ohio State plays Maryland.
Catholics.
Which will be their second straight game against the Catholics. Which will actually be – now I know this stat is sort of a quirky one. Every opponent Ohio State has played so far has been undefeated at the time. Now, obviously, the first game, of course, they're undefeated because it's the first game.
Sure.
But every opponent they've played so far has been undefeated. And that'll be true with Maryland. They're 5-0.
Okay.
And they really should be ranked, but they're like 26th. They're like the first team receiving votes that's not in the poll.
Okay.
So, could be interesting. And did you watch any of the Ryder Cup?
I did not. I saw some
didn't either.
highlights, and I saw that Europe just beat the pants off of
Well, all I saw was stuff on social media, which, again, you have to be careful about getting your perception of anything on social media, but about arguments within the American team and guys complaining and, like, you know, not liking each other and just, like,
taunting hat waving I read about on social media.
bizarre stuff.
One quick MLB note. The season ended yesterday,
Yes.
and the Mets fired their manager.
Okay.
Buck Showalter has been let go.
He's been shown the door.
It was a rough year,
Well, yeah, given the expectations.
given the expectations, and they hired a new president of baseball operations who I believe is my age, which that's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
When you look at somebody and go, oh, you're running the Mets organization and you're 35?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's a weird feeling.
That's a fun stage of life.
Yeah. I feel inadequate, unsuccessful.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
What have I done with my life?
Yeah.
This guy's running in a Major League Baseball organization.
So, yeah. So
Okay.
we've hired David Stearns is his name, who we hired.
Stearns.
Not
David Stern, singular.
No, David Stearns.
Okay.
He had been running the Brewers for the last several years.
Okay.
And the word on the street is we might get Craig Counsell as our coach, who is currently the Milwaukee Brewers manager, whose contract has not been renewed.
Okay. There you go.
Or he has not signed a contract.
I see. David Stern, former NBA commissioner, he's passed away, correct?
Yes.
He's
R.I.P.
no longer with us. That's what I thought. Okay. Just checking.
Yes, he is. 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yes.
Lived up to his name well.
Stern.
He was stern. Yes,
Okay.
I heard so Dan Patrick tells a story of going into his office to interview him, and his secretary lets Dan into the office to like sit down with him for a few minutes, and he has like an interview office, and then he has like a secondary office where he like actually does email and has like sticky notes places.
Right.
And so he's in there screaming on the phone. And Dan's like, oh, my gosh, what's going on? Like, what is this about? What's happening? He comes in and goes, darn contractor's at my house doing X, Y, Z and isn't doing it right. You know, it's just like a normal guy screaming at a contractor at his house.
Upset with the drywall guy.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, John, you ready to move on?
Sure.
It is time to continue our series out of 2 Peter on different character qualities that we are to be adding to one another. And so we have already addressed faith and virtue/excellence. We have addressed knowledge. And today we come to self-control. So just for some context, John, why don't you go ahead and read 2 Peter 1, verses 5 through, let's go 8.
Okay. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay. So we're talking about self-control. So what comes to your mind, John, when you think of the word/phrase self-control?
I mean, basically not being a river of emotion and giving into every passion that you have. So restraining the self.
All right.
To useful ends, basically, is what I think of. What do you think of?
Yeah, I think demonstrating restraint when it comes to one's emotions, one's impulses, one's desires, one's speech, one's actions. That, I think of, the difference between maybe a boat that is anchored versus a boat that's not in a storm. A boat that's anchored, it'll move a little bit. It's not like it's completely, motionless, but it only moves so far. It's got a fixed point that keeps it, within a certain range. And so I think of self-control as sort of that anchor point of keeping one's emotions, impulses, desires, actions within a certain range of just within a certain range.
How do you build that? How do you grow that ability to control your emotions, harness them?
Yeah. Well, I think it's fair to acknowledge that for some people it is more challenging than others. I think some people are wired more emotionally, that they seem to experience stronger emotions, stronger impulses, and so it's more effort to kind of rein those in. So, I mean, I think part of it is just having some sense of awareness of your own desires and impulses and those sorts of things. But I've always been a big believer that self-control is contagious across areas of life. That if you can start to demonstrate self-control in one area of life, that it is more likely to bleed over into others.
So like if you're able to show something that's related to self-control, discipline in an area of life, you would say that's going to move into other areas of life with like exercise, for instance.
Correct. Yeah. So that if you are a person who, and maybe this is not the best example, but we'll go with it. When it comes to food, if you do not in any way restrain any of your impulses to eat, what you want to eat, when you want to eat it, how much of it you want to eat, then it's probably not surprising if you struggle to control other impulses in your life. And even with that example, I think oftentimes the issue with self-control is keeping desires and impulses within their proper boundaries, within their God-appointed range, so to speak. Obviously the desire to eat, that's a necessary thing. That's your body's way of saying, I need fuel, I need energy.
That's a pre-fall desire.
Yeah, that's hardwired in.
Yep.
Now that of course can be abused, and if it's not kept in some measure of control, can lead to all sorts of health problems.
Yeah.
If you think of I just think if you can start to establish self-control in one or two areas of your life, generally speaking, I think that starts to build kind of spiritual and emotional and mental muscle that can be used to apply to other areas of life.
Well, and it's just a good point that these things don't happen in isolation.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not like, well, I'm going to have my spiritual self-control over here, but my bodily self-control or my emotional self-control are going to be rampant. They impact. They flow between one another.
Yeah, and I would say that in one sense, spiritual self-control is sort of an overarching form of self-control that God uses to show up in other more specific kinds of self-control in terms of physical desires or impulses or things like that as well.
Yeah. And this one is always interesting. I think self-control is interesting because ancient philosophers talked about it all the time.
They did.
Just all the time.
Especially the Stoics.
They regularly came back and harped on self-control. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why were they able to sort of weed through the mess that is human thought and emotion and come to the conclusion like, actually, we should be restraining these things within ourselves? Why did they come to that?
Well, I think they probably came to that because their vision of the good life extended beyond pleasure. That there were higher ideals in view than just physical pleasure, which is really where lack of self-control tends to manifest itself, is an unrestrained pursuit of some form of physical pleasure typically. And so I think ancient philosophers had a higher vision of what the good life was that led them to say, actually reining in some of those impulses is a good thing, because when you rein them in, you get this greater good than whatever that, pleasure is that you're pursuing.
And don't you think they had so many bad examples of people who didn't do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, this would have been certainly during the era where Stoicism was really popular, but I think of like a guy like Caligula or Nero or, Commodus, right? These guys who are just like, why wouldn't I do this? I'm the emperor. I can do whatever I want.
Sure.
And but this leads to a lot of destruction and a lot of pain,
right?
As well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's, and this is where it's interesting. When the early Christians talked about self-control, it was different than what, say, the Stoics. The Stoics were more interested in, for them, the good life was essentially not being thrown about by the whims of circumstances and emotions, but having this sort of resolute, unmoved kind of steadiness to one's experience of life, which is why we get that term stoic today. If someone is stoic, we say, well, they're not emotional. You never see them up. You never see them down. They're just kind of even keel, kind of emotionless oftentimes.
It's a slam today.
It is. It is. But, the early Christians were not – that was not the kind of self-control the early Christians were after. They were after the sort of self-control that reined in sinful desires and impulses and such, or maybe put better, reining in desires and impulses that can be sinful, may not be in and of themselves. I mean, the desire to eat is obviously not sinful in and of itself.
Sure. But you start eating another person, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've probably shared this illustration on the pod before, but Edwards liked to talk about.
I was wondering when we were going to get Edwards in the fire
of course.
in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. He basically talks about, look, fire is great when kept in the proper environment. When it's in the stove, it provides heat. It enables you to cook. Depending on what or if it's in a fireplace, it provides light for the room, which you can do all sorts of good things.
Oh, yeah.
When it escapes the fireplace and runs free in the house, it burns it down.
We could probably say that we definitely could say the same thing about like natural gas in our homes today.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Like coming through your stove in a controlled burn, absolutely great.
Or in your gas fireplace.
In your gas fireplace, absolutely produces heat, light, ambiance.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. However, we had an incident not too far from here where there was a gas leak. It was in Columbia City, actually. Do you remember this?
I do.
And this guy was in a sort of an abandoned store, and he's like, "Oh, I smell gas," and he's going back to look for the leak, and it exploded on him. And my house was probably 2 miles away at the time. Shook my house.
I remember.
Blew out the windows around the houses. I mean, a destructive force.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think for the Christian, it's self-control is something that is necessary to rightly order our desires, not to necessarily eliminate them. I think that's where some people go wrong, is to say, I just need to get rid of my desire for, too much food or sex or whatever it might be. Like, well, no, oftentimes those desires are built into you by God. It's that they're not being put in their proper context or in their right outlet, and that's when they get problematic. And so for the Christian, self-control is one of those qualities that enables us to rightly order our desires so that they are put to God's purposes, God's right and good designed purposes for us. Rather than us becoming enslaved to them, we end up utilizing them in the way that God designed us to experience them properly. Now, I will say, I think Christians can also go sideways on self-control when they don't remember that it is a fruit of the Spirit. I mean, it's specifically listed in Galatians 5 as a fruit of the Spirit. Peter doesn't say that here, but Paul does in Galatians 5. And so it's the Spirit who produces this kind of ability to rightly order our desires and impulses. And so it's not – so self-control is not so that we puff ourselves up, ironically, right? Like, oh, look at me. I'm the master of my desires. I'm not blown about by anything. Like, well, that's actually called pride. And so it's actually,
There's a Seinfeld reference here,
yeah,
just for the listener at home. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where the Spirit produces self-control as a means of surrender to the lordship of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that I think sometimes is missing in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else on self-control?
Well, I'll just go back to I think that for most people, it is contagious. And so if this is one where you're like, I struggle with this, trying to grow in self-control in another area of life can often help you bleed over into different areas of life. And so, if it's I struggle to get consistent time in the Word, okay, well, maybe finding some other area where you are exercising self-control in will help you bleed over into that area as well. I just find that for me, one area in particular is when it comes to exercise. If I'm working out relatively consistently, it feels like other areas of my life in terms of exercising self-control are easier.
Yeah.
If I'm not, then it becomes more challenging. But that's just me. But I think there is some sort of I think it is difficult to be I'm really self-controlled in this one area here, but these other 7 areas over here I'm not self-controlled in.
Yeah.
I don't think that's very common.
Yeah. Yeah. And the best way to start being self-controlled is to figure out one of those ways. Start chipping away at it.
Yeah.
Doing it. If it's goodness, you want to read more Christian literature. Read 5 pages a day. It's going to take you 7-8 minutes, and by just continue to do, and then spread that to some other areas of life as well.
Yeah. Just start building it into your daily or weekly routine where you say, okay, I'm going to do this at this time, and I'm not going to let anything, barring like some remarkable catastrophe, stop me from doing that.
Yeah.
It's fixed, and then just kind of keep building on top of that.
Yeah.
So, All right. Time now for This Day in Sports History.
All right, this day in sports history, October the 3rd.
Crazy.
Yep, we're in the last quarter of the year here.
October, you can make the case that October is the best month of the year for sports.
Football, baseball.
You've got football going, you've got baseball playoffs, and you've got the beginnings of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're getting in kind of a sweet spot there with the
Yeah.
major sports, where by the end of by early to mid October, you're really into the.
You could also make an argument fall has some of the best food. October has some of the best food as a part of it. You get your kind of like warm, homey soups in there. Good breads.
Yeah, you remember when our life group used to do the soup thing? You remember that?
Oh, that was a great time.
So good.
Good to be alive.
So I do have a question about fall food.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was having a conversation with one of our alumna, it would be. She, being from New York,
Okay.
said that until she moved here to go to seminary,
Mm-hmm.
the whole fascination with pumpkin was completely foreign to her. Now, you have your roots in New York, though you didn't grow. I
left when I was
earliest years.
7.
Yeah. So, is that true? I mean, I know that we in the Midwest love our pumpkin, pumpkin pie, pumpkin muffins, pumpkin spice latte, like the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a dynamic. I always grew up with pumpkin pie.
Okay.
So I always had pumpkin pie every Thanksgiving. That was always a thing. I do think there is a dynamic where pumpkin-flavored things have become more of an in vogue thing in the last 10 years or so. And I think Starbucks
That's been a part of it for sure.
with the pumpkin spice latte. But
Yeah.
like I went to a fall party this weekend and had pumpkin cookies.
Yeah, those are good.
They're delicious.
Was there like the cream cheese frosting on top there?
Yes, there were some of those there. There were several different iterations of pumpkin cookies there.
Oh man,
And one of them had cream cheese frosting. But
so good.
I do not remember those at all until probably the last decade.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's just a epoch we're in right now of pumpkin-flavored goodies.
Does that occur somewhere on the dispensationalism chart?
Yeah. A dispensation of pumpkin.
Dispensation of pumpkin.
Is that a I realize I'm not answering your question here, but
I do think it's become more popular in the last decade.
But do you feel like you grew up with pumpkin spice lattes and
No.
pumpkin cookies? Did you grow up with pumpkin cookies?
Yeah.
Did you really? You see, I do not remember that from my childhood. Yeah. Pumpkin pie, yes.
Of course. Yeah.
American classic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the pumpkin cookie, pumpkin muffin, not so much.
Okay.
We do pumpkin soup at home.
I've not had that.
Yeah, it's very good.
I don't know if I'd like that.
It's pumpkin puree just in a soup.
Right.
It's fantastic.
Okay.
It's warm cinnamon in there.
Yeah, you gotta have cinnamon.
Oh, pairs so well. Anyway, October. What are we talking about?
This day in sports history.
This day in sports history, October 3rd. We're in the year 2023.
Yeah.
Year of our Lord. 1888.
Yeah.
That might be the oldest one.
It's up there.
We have New Zealand natives, a privately organized and mainly Maori rugby team. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
I think it's Maori.
Maori plays first game in UK, beats Surrey 4-1. First national rugby team to wear all black and perform the haka.
Right. That's their pre-game
dance. Warm-up thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Maori are the native people of New Zealand, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we call them Kiwis now? That's sort of their.
I think that's a general reference to anybody from New Zealand.
But the Maori is a specific tribe of some kind.
Well, those are the original. I think,
Okay.
If I'm right, I could be wrong, but I thought Kiwi is now just a very generic reference to anybody who now comes from New Zealand, regardless of whether they are, in essence, native or whether they descended from English settlers.
I remember interacting with British in New Zealand, and they were trying to explain the finer points between the British accent and the New Zealand accent. There's not much there. In the Australian accent, the difference between the three of those, that was tough.
Yeah. Honestly, part of the reason I put that on there is just I loved our trip to New Zealand.
That was great.
That was great. I want to go back.
That was great. The buses ran on time. Nicest people in the world.
Yeah, it was great.
Weird downtown.
Yeah, Christchurch had a little bit of an interesting downtown area. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Christchurch, great town.
Yes.
Great town. Okay, 1919, Cuban Dolph Luque becomes the first Hispanic player to appear in the Baseball World Series, pitching one inning in relief of Cincinnati Reds. In the Cincinnati Reds 3-0 defeat of the Chicago White Sox at Comiskey.
So 1919, would that not be the Black Sox World Series? I think that is.
That might be.
Could be.
I know they played the Reds. I know it was the White Sox against the Reds.
I'm pretty sure that was 1919.
1989, Oakland Raiders promote 42-year-old Art Shell as the first African-American to be an NFL head coach in modern times, taking over for Mike Shanahan.
Yes.
Big deal. 1 year later, 1990, Kansas City third baseman George Brett becomes the first in MLB history to win a batting title in 3 different decades, goes 1-for-1 in the Royals' 5-2 loss versus Cleveland to win the AL batting title. 329 average, AL batting champion, also in 76 and 1980.
That's impressive.
That is impressive. Wow. Yeah, 3 different decades. 1995, former NFL running back, broadcaster, and actor O.J. Simpson. We got to bring the juice into this, huh?
I mean,
Found not guilty of the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman in L.A. On this same day in 2008, he is found guilty of charges of kidnapping and armed robbery.
which he actually went to prison for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which he's out. He's out now.
He is. He is. Still looking for the real killer, obviously.
He's on Twitter.
I did hear about that, yeah. Do you follow him?
I do not. I do not want to support him in any way, shape, or form. Did you see the SNL skit where he joins Bumble once getting out of prison?
No.
It would be worth your time.
Okay.
He's on a date and he goes, "Oh, so what? You're not from the United States. Where are you from?" And she goes, "Well, I'm from this Soviet torn country in Eastern Europe." And she goes, "Oh, did you guys have a revolution around 1995?" She goes, "Oh yes, very little in, very little out." That's great. That's wonderful news.
Okay. So in 95, you would have been what?
Seven.
Okay. So do you have any memory of the OJ thing?
Very little.
Okay.
Like they televised the trial, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I remember my mom watching the trial.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, and I vaguely knew what was going on, but not really.
Yeah.
One last one. 2007, South African's Mark Boucher breaks Ian Healy's record to become the wicket-keeper with the most dismissals in Test cricket, 395, stumps Umar Gul of Paul Harris in second inning of first Test win versus Pakistan in Karachi.
Yeah.
That was a great sentence.
Yeah, I don't know that you understood, or I understood much of it, but all right. Who are you going to go with here, John?
Feels like George Brett
Yep.
is the way to go,
I
right?
agree. Yep, that's who I want. All right. One thing you liked.
All right. The one thing I like this week is I think I've had this before, but I want to zero in on something. The Revolutions podcast with Mike Duncan. I am about halfway through the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
That was a despicable era.
Yeah, crazy.
I'm right at the point where I think the king is about to lose his head. So we just did a whole bit on the guillotine, and it took us halfway through the series to get to the guillotine.
Yeah.
And then the question is, where do you stop with the French Revolution? Because technically you could roll that right into Napoleon and
Right.
write it all the way out.
You could. Yeah. Yeah, I that's why Mike Duncan gets paid the big bucks to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. But the French Revolution, wild stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely wild stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go with the TGC conference, Gospel Coalition.
How was that?
It was great.
How did your TED Talk go?
It was fine, though. The couple of things. So I'm sitting there looking over my notes to prepare to get up there, and I realize I didn't print them large enough for my failing eyes to see comfortably.
Interesting. Is that new wrinkle in the?
It's just poor planning, and I didn't want to even though I manuscript things out, I don't read my manuscript when I speak. It's just there for me to check in on to track my progress. So I didn't want to put my reading glasses on for that. So that was a little bit of a stomach churning. I hope I know this well enough. I think I do. But yeah, it was great to interact with the other contributors, and the conference itself was fantastic. It's a little bit of a different experience being on the speaker side of things.
Yeah.
Even though I just did a little micro event, I had a speaker pass, meaning I was able to go into the speaker's lounge.
Oh, nice.
Eat with other speakers' meals. Eat meals there. So
what do they serve in the speaker's room? At TGC?
The couple meals I was in there, they had some good. They had a chicken option, a beef option.
Like a box or like a buffet?
No, like a buffet.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nice. It's just a little wild sitting in there. Like, okay, there's Don Carson, there's Lig Duncan.
You say hello to Don?
I did.
Yeah, how's Don doing?
He asked how things at Grace were going.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Had a little chat with him. I reminded him of how he suggested that my younger son Jake quit basketball. Because his wife was standing there, and his wife got a big kick out of this. She's like, Don, why would you do that? He's like, I don't remember this. And so I explained, well, here's the context. Like, he was complaining about his back hurting, and Don just simply said, one simple way to make that go away is to quit basketball.
And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. I said, well, he didn't quite take your advice. And he's like, is he still playing? Like, well, he graduated from college, so he's done now, but he continued another, 4+ years after your little pep talk of telling him to quit.
Yeah.
So it's just fun. There's Rebecca McLaughlin. There's Jen Wilkin. There's,
Who'd you sit down and eat with?
I ate with my son.
Okay.
My older son, John,
came into the speaker's room with you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yes. I think he was a little caught off guard by the number of people who came up to me, not necessarily in the speaker's lounge, but
out and about
as I'm walking out and about.
Things that I usually make fun of you for when I'm with you.
Oh, you would have had a field day. You would have had a field day. Yeah. I mean, I was talking with him, and our president was down there, Drew Flam.
Oh, yeah.
And
he had a great time.
And Brent, our chaplain, and your boss,
yeah.
Nathan. Yeah. So I was talking with them, and from a distance, Nancy Guthrie. Do you know the name Nancy Guthrie?
Okay. Yeah.
So she sees me and walks briskly up and is like, "I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to run into you." And so we had a nice little chat, and of course that made my wife's day because that's one of her favorite authors. And so I took a picture with Nancy and sent it to my wife, and she remembered the time where my wife chased her down outside of a Franklin, Tennessee pizza joint to meet her.
Nice.
So that was 12 years ago probably.
Wow.
She remembered it. So, yes.
Wow. Who else ran up to you? Any others?
It was a lot of people. There was some a handful of Grace alums.
That's great.
It's great to see them, as well as just people who had read this book of mine or that. And hey, really appreciated that. Love this, that sort of thing.
Did you mention the podcast to all these people?
I did not. I know, missed opportunity, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Missed opportunity. All right, we got to wrap this up. We have talked about The JETS, Jets.
Tough.
Yes, we have talked about self-control. We have talked about George Brett. We have talked about the French Revolution. And we have talked about my experience at the Gospel Coalition. And so I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.